With some scenes you may find upsetting. My friend Sasha.
Я прошу вас, если что-то случится,
I beg you, if anything happens to us, I beg you to show this tape to the whole world and to say that these people are ready to carry out assassinations inside this country as well as abroad.
Внутри страны, так и за рубежом.
In my heart, I did not believe I would ever have to fulfill Sasha's plea and show the tape to anybody. I did not believe that the condition for that, something bad happening to Sasha or his family, would ever happen. But it did. There was a feeling of uneasiness in the air. Russia was celebrating the new year in the way it always has. But I felt the country was entering a new era, yet few were prepared to admit it. A ferocious new war was raging in Chechnya. But everybody in the capital pretended that nothing unusual was happening.
Я принял решение, долго и мучительно над ним размышлял.
As President Yeltsin delivered his message for the new millennium, we were all uncertain where the country was heading next.
Сегодня последний день уходящего века, и я ухожу в отставку. Я понял, главное дело в своей жизни я сделал. Россия уже никогда не вернется в прошлое. Я хочу сказать каждому из вас: будьте счастливы. Вы заслужили счастье и спокойствие. С Новым годом, с Новым веком, дорогие мои.
I was appalled by the humanitarian catastrophe of the war in Chechnya.
Look, Mr. Putin, what sort of bandits you gunned down.
I made a documentary about the child victims of the war. I showed that film to the mothers and families of Russian soldiers. They were shocked by the sight of atrocities. But their reaction told me something important about Russian attitudes to the war.
Нам всем говорили, всем, что война это плохо. Мне 15 лет после Отечественной войны прошло, когда я родилась. И моя мама, и моя бабушка, они все говорили, чтобы не было войны. Самое главное, мы все в 1975 году боялись Америки, потому что боялись атомной бомбардировки. И вот эти вот кадры, и я помню сама, когда мы смотрели фильмы о Второй мировой войне, как там показывали, партизан пытали или что-то, слезы лились рекой, то есть все это мы сопереживаем, эти вот кадры, когда видишь ребенка без ноги, это все ужасно, мы все против войны. Но дело в том, что тут есть, ну вот вы говорите правда, неправда, тут есть обратная сторона. Если бы, может быть, не было террористических актов, все бы по-другому относились, опять-таки к этой войне. Чем объяснить вот это, то, что дома взорвали в Москве?
А кто взорвал?
А вот я опять-таки говорю, а кто вот это сделал? Мы же не знаем. А вот кто это сделал?
That question, who did the bombings of apartment blocks in Russian cities in 1999, still haunts Russia. Hundreds were killed, and the whole country was traumatized. Authorities immediately declared the atrocities were carried out by Chechen terrorists.
Источником этого террористического акта мы называем чеченских бандитов.
Within days of the bombings, the Russian troops had gone into Chechnya for a second time in a decade. Inflamed by the bombings, popular support for Vladimir Putin's hardline presidential campaign soared by 70%.
Пока мы не уничтожим здесь вот это гнездо терроризма, спокойной жизни не будет. Будут взрываться дома, будет везде своеобразная мафия оброками обкладывать всех. Будут везде угрожать, будут воровать людей, торговать ими.
In November 2000, I heard an item on the BBC World News.
Russian Secret Service officer Alexander Litvinenko has asked for political asylum in Britain on arrival at Heathrow Airport. Mr. Litvinenko claims that his life was in danger in Russia because he accused the FSB, the Russian Secret Service, of being behind the terrorist bombings in Russian cities.
Like many Russians, I thought the official explanation of the bombings didn't quite add up. I wanted to know more. I searched for Litvinenko on the internet and ordered his book about the bombings blowing up Russia, which was only available in English. It was to be the start of an intense relationship with a man I came to know as my friend Sasha.
После выхода книги тоже же, это вот книга вышла, все же прочитали, большое количество публикаций, большое количество в интернете своих отзывов. Одни пишут, что это ложь, что Литвиненко это негодяй, вот. Ну хорошо.
I found that Litvinenko had a troubled history. A high-flying young officer in the FSB, he had fallen afoul of his superiors and had spent some months in jail. On his release, he had fled the country with his wife and young son, but was continuing his campaign against his former FSB bosses from London. I began to try and contact Litvinenko. First I phoned the office of the Russian oligarch Boris Berezovsky, now a political exile in London, like Litvinenko.
Алло, добрый день, Андрей Некрасов. Здравствуйте. Я просто в факсе рассказал о проекте, который снимается по мотивам книги, по событиям, вот описанным в книге «Blowing Up Russia». Вот, с Литвиненко и так далее. Спасибо. Всего доброго. До свидания.
I went to the House of Lords, where Berezovsky had told me he would be going for a presentation by Chechen exiles. The only person I knew here was Vanessa Redgrave, with whom I worked on the film about the children of Chechnya. I hoped she might have Litvinenko's number, but it turned out that she didn't.
Сразу же после трагедии 11 сентября мы заявили о своей готовности на сотрудничество с международной коалицией по борьбе с международным терроризмом. Мы на этом и сейчас настаиваем.
After the presentation, I finally made contact with Boris Berezovsky and asked him about Litvinenko's book, Blowing Up Russia.
Фактура там, ну, то, что я с чем знаком, она действительно полностью соответствует этим документам, а самое главное тому опыту, который ну, лично Литвиненко имеет.
То есть это ваше мнение?
Спасибо вам. Спасибо.
The next day, Berezovsky gave me Litvinenko's number.
Мне дадут телефон, потому что я вам слово не знаком.
Мобильный телефон 077 68 394. До свидания.
At last, in April 2003, I was going to meet up with Alexander Litvinenko at his house in London's Muswell Hill. We were to talk for hours that night, and it was the start of our friendship. He told me how his battle with the Russian security system had begun.
Of course, it was gradual. I started to analyze things, thinking we all work hard all our lives. Take my parents, who worked all their lives and live in poverty. Something's not right here. In a normal society, people who work honestly throughout their lives shouldn't be poor. When I started work, I discovered how many people in our country are in prison. I thought, a normal society can't have so many criminals. Our country is criminal. Almost 50% of adults have served at least one sentence in their lifetime. Then I started to look at my superiors and discovered that the people who make it to the highest ranks often have more faults than merits. I stopped looking at them as gods of some kind. I met some very mediocre people in positions of power.
Sasha Litvinenko's battle with Vladimir Putin began at an FSB meeting. Litvinenko's attacks were to intensify when Putin went on to become the Russian president.
I've looked around at what's happening in Russia and can tell you Putin's way to the top was pure genius. Nobody had ever heard about him before. Putin is the result of Russia's last 80 years. In Russia, they've always beaten down those who raise their heads above the rest. Now that Putin is president, he's become of interest to me. I started asking people who knew him before and used to work with him. Nobody remembers him. Not in school, not at university. Putin has been elected president. But who is Putin? Before the election, we were told, wait till he's elected, and then you'll find out. Meanwhile, Putin himself was walking around with a mysterious air about him. In any civilized country, only a public figure can become president. Someone who's been in the public and political arena for at least 5 or 10 years. The people and the independent media would be watching him with X-ray eyes. And if any faults were discovered which would disqualify him, he would never become president. Can you imagine in the UK, a person being elected prime minister when there's a doubt whether he's a thief? In Germany or the UK, a person with a criminal history would never get to a position of authority. We're talking about human morals here.
Sasha's wife, Marina, was always aware of his uneasiness with the morality of his bosses. When did you feel the first signs of Sasha's conflict with his superiors, with his organization, started to show? And what was those first signs?
Sasha wasn't agree with his top officer in way how they worked. And maybe it was some first sign of trouble. It means he already shown his person who will not agree with some dishonest way.
Марксиста-ленинца, выдающегося руководителя коммунистической партии и советского государства, виднейшего деятеля.
Значит, в Советском Союзе было две идеологии.
In the Soviet Union, there were two ideologies, communist and criminal. In 1991, communist ideology ceased to exist, and only the criminal was left. And the KGB was renamed the FSB. Nothing really changed. Everything stayed as it was before. The only difference was that a KGB officer killed for ideology, an FSB officer kills for money.
I understand now, people just do their job, like for money. It's not real passion what people do. And on the other side, everything what Sasha did, it was passion. everything what he did, he felt exactly, you know, it's never been for money at all.
ФСБ фактически спецслужбой не является.
I wouldn't call the FSB special services. The FSB is a secret, corrupt political organization.
Можно даже сказать, если
in communist times, it was the armed force of the Communist Party. In today's Russia, the FSB is the armed force of a certain clan of Russian public servants.
Клана российских чиновников.
In 1994, Litvinenko was investigating an assassination attempt on the billionaire businessman Boris Berezovsky. They became friends.
But when
Berezovsky told me he soon had reason to value Litvinenko's friendship when police suddenly came to arrest the oligarch over the murder of a journalist.
And Alexander, that time, was in the office, and he stand behind of me and said, if you now take Berezovsky, I will kill you, because you have don't any right to do that. Because really, police didn't have any documents and so. And I was absolutely shocked. And he took the gun, yes, and demonstrated his gun. And police officer was very surprised. And he asked, who are you? And Alexander presented him his document and said that he was sure that he know who is he, that he present FSB, and he 100% sure that I'm not involved, and he does not allow to take me because he think that they will kill me. And Alexander really saved my life.
Litvinenko became fascinated by the privileged social circle around Berezovsky.
It was very unusual from the beginning, and particularly when he started to ask me about my vision of business in Russia, about my vision of importance of business community in Russia. I really become almost crazy that this simple guy from KGB is trying really to understand. And not only to understand, very often he gave his vision of some events. Initially, I didn't take it seriously. I just also think that it's maybe game to become closer to me and so and so. But step by step, I recognize that he's absolutely sincere.
Sasha Litvinenko gave me a startling tape. It recorded the event which became the turning point in his struggle with the FSB and their growing power in Russia.
One day he came to me and said that he got order to kill me. He got order from his general in FSB. Really, initially, I thought that it's just joke because everybody know that we have good relations with Alexander. And how it's possible to give him order to kill me if they knew that we have good relations? And he said, Boris, but not only just me present at this meeting, and 4 other officers of FSB also present there, and they may confirm that. And I said, okay. And he invited them to my office, and they absolutely confirm what Alexander told, that they really got order to kill me.
А вот если бы было нужно, типа, двинуть, человека. Убить конкретно было. Да, конкретно. Он говорит, убить. Ну, я просто... Значит, он говорит, ты бы смог это сделать? Можешь помочь? То есть убить меня? Ну, конечно. Меня же. Несколько раз. И вот у него тема разговора в нашей мире была построена на 20 минут. Вы же, говорит, делаете такие вещи. Саша, ну вот так вот. Да. И потом ты решил на Сашу, говорит, ты мог его убить? Ну, все поручили. И такая пауза.
General said that I'm big problem, big headache for FSB people. That I try to convince them, and I try to influence the president to crush this organization, and so. And it's the best way is just to kill him.
В принципе, покушение на вас можно рассматривать как террористический акт. А когда эти вещи говорит замначальника управления одного из ведущих своему подчиненному, подполковнику, дает. В принципе, я это могу рассчитывать не как команду действия.
Litvinenko and other rebellious FSB officers immediately organized a press conference to denounce the widespread corruption of their bosses.
Органы ФСБ стали использоваться отдельными должностными лицами не в конституционных целях безопасности государства и личности, а в своих частных политических и меркантильных целях. Для сведения счетов с неугодными лицами за определенную плату.
The press conference enraged Litvinenko's bosses. He was now an enemy, and his wife felt the consequences.
I said, it's my husband, and I love him how he is. And I think maybe he could do it because he believed I supported him. Every time he just was absolutely sure I behind him. And when of course I could ask him, Sasha, did you think about what could happen with us? He said, of course, and I hope you will be okay, but Marina, I couldn't be in a different way. And I think when I married with him, I just was already ready for everything what could happen with him.
Up to the last stage of his life, he looks like very naive. And it's helped him a lot to understand life. Because to be naive, it means to be like a child. It means to watch everything with clear eye. Yeah?
When my conflict with the FSB started, the director Kovalyov decided to behave like a real criminal, threatening me, demanding that I should cover for my superior's crimes, practically haggling with me, forcing me to change my evidence to the prosecutor's office. That was the behavior of a common criminal, not an officer.
Sasha gave me another revealing videotape. It contained the testimony of an FSB supergrass.
6 лет я работаю на ФСБ, агент. Что я могу сказать? Мой куратор был и есть, и остается Литвиненко. Саш, я его люблю, уважаю. Против него выдвинуты, знаете, просто такие обвинения, что это у меня просто глаза закрываются на это, на все. Просто закрываются. Он был и есть, остается человеком. И в данный момент, я остался без помощи. Из меня вышибают показания просто Костиков. Где эта записная книжка сейчас? Вот он. Вот. Вглядитесь, пожалуйста. Вот. Барсуков, Костиков. Они из меня вышибают показания. Для того, чтобы я его посадил. Как я могу посадить человека, которого он мне просто, Господи, Боже мой, он мне просто жизнь создал. Не деньгами, не чем-то. А просто он сказал: Ром, иди по нормальному пути. Нормально. Не будь бандитом, не будь никем. Сейчас, в данный момент, меня ловит солнцевская группировка и так далее и тому подобное. Меня все ловят. Я сейчас прячусь. и прячется и от государства, и от бандитов. Ну и что? Что мне теперь делать? Я не знаю. Я вот агент, да. И что? Все, моя жизнь закончилась.
The FSB is corrupt all the way to the very top. It's a criminal organization with a criminal in charge. I had no illusions left.
How is it possible to explain to an average Russian citizen that FSB officers are capable of organizing bombings so that peaceful citizens would be killed?
Я вам скажу, что по опросам больше 50%, а даже, по-моему, последний был 60%.
According to the latest polls, 50 or even 60% of the population believe that it was the FSB who bombed the apartment buildings. They don't have any doubts it's the FSB. They believe 100%. But here I'd like to talk not about the people, but the FSB itself and its leaders. We've been saying for 3 years it was the FSB's doing, and giving conclusive proof of that. If these facts were presented to a truly civilized and fair court, the FSB would lose the case. This is the reason why the FSB never tried to sue anybody who accuses them. Not once did they try to argue against any of the accusations. The only argument they use in their defense is, we didn't bomb the buildings because we couldn't possibly do that. Although if you take the KGB's history and the history of the FSB today, I can tell you that their main activity is terrorism. Say a terrorist act was committed. Who'd be the first suspect? An organization which has a terrorist record. We're being told, these people couldn't do that. Wait a minute, which people couldn't do that? Putin and FSB director Patrushev?
Sasha refers to highly suspicious actions of the FSB and Putin personally. But there he was, talking in his kitchen, while Putin seemed to be a respected world leader. Was it because of the presumption of innocence which Sasha couldn't break through with all his logic? But on balance, who was more credible? This man who let me look in his eyes, or somebody who gagged every free voice in the country and presided over atrocities in Chechnya? I'd met a young man who told me terrible stories about his experiences as a soldier in Chechnya. He described how weapons and even whole Russian platoons of soldiers were sold by their officers to the Chechens. And he detailed his own brutal experiences of being tortured by his superiors to make him sign a false confession about selling arms and ammunition.
At the end of the summer, I decided to hang myself. The pressure had been on for 3 months. I couldn't bear it any longer. I found a rope in a tree and set off to hang myself. But a friend of mine who'd been through a similar ordeal stopped me and said, "So what will you gain from that? You'll hang yourself and your relatives will be informed that you were guilty of something you've never done. You won't prove anything. You'll make it worse." I listened to him, but exactly the same happened again and drove me to a second attempt. He managed to stop me again. The third time I was determined to go through with it. But at the very last moment I thought, no, I'll pull through this. I spent all night thinking and decided I will prove that I'm innocent. That kept me going, to show the truth and injustice of what happened.
He wanted to prove he was telling the truth, and that gave him the strength to bear the months of torture. But how interested were people in his truth? There was one genuinely independent newspaper in Russia, Novaya Gazeta, only one which didn't mince words about the war in Chechnya and other burning issues. In the heart of St. Petersburg, I decided to find out how easy it was to get hold of the most important printed media of accurate information in the country.
Новые газеты. Нет? Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте. Новые газеты у вас есть? Не бывает?
I met a man who was buying a book about Russian history. Perhaps he would be interested in exploring the truth about his country.
Я слышал об этом. А что
Это хуйня. Да? Называют по-русски хуйня. Но тут что-то есть хоть. А то мы же ничего не знаем про нашу историю. Про нашу реформу мы не знаем.
Неправда имеется в виду? Это неправда?
Нет, я думаю, что наоборот. Я бы не стал ее брать.
А почему хуйня-то? Между нами говоря.
Потому что, а у нас все у русских так называется. Все по интернету.
Понятно.
I remembered what Sasha had said about the state of journalism in Russia.
К сожалению, в России сейчас, мы были все во времена, жили во времена.
Unfortunately, there's no real journalism in Russia.
Журналистика.
It didn't exist in Soviet times, and it doesn't exist today under Putin.
Сейчас после прихода Путина журналистики нет. В России сейчас пропаганда. Так вот, российская пропаганда.
What does exist is propaganda. Russian propaganda protects power.
И пропаганда это как наркотик. То есть она людям.
Propaganda is like a drug. It protects power and persuades people that those in power care about them, that they're the greatest in the world.
И люди перестают.
And people stop analyzing what's going on. Not all people, but quite a lot of them. This drug is convenient and quite acceptable to them.
То есть некоторые люди, они пытаются защититься.
In a way, people protect themselves from unwelcome information. They live in some kind of fog of information.
В каком-то постоянном информационном тумане.
I talked to Russia's most courageous campaigning journalist, Anna Politkovskaya. She had written a powerful book about the horrors of the Chechen War. How do you assess the influence of what you're writing about? Who knows about it? How much do people know and how much do they want to know?
They don't want to know. Nobody wants to know.
Do people buy the book?
Yes, the book is being bought, but there is one thing. Somewhere I saw a publication. Naturally, nobody writes reviews on books like that. But in some magazine there was the following mention of the book. And I think it's priceless. Exactly hits the nail on the head as to what you're asking about. It said, "Here it comes. Politkovskaya's book has come out. But if we believe all that, then we need to reconsider all our views on our lives, on our authorities, and on the war in Chechnya." But what for?
It's the author who is asking.
Yes, the author of the article. Why reconsider? It will take a lot of thinking. I've come across this same attitude in letters to the newspaper from readers. They did read the paper, they did read the book, and a big thank you to those who read it, but they pushed it away. In other words, there is no doubt that our society is becoming Philistine. I have my own difficult life. Yes, I have read your report, but I'd rather not think about it.
So they don't need to ban your book.
Of course not. Anything I or my colleagues write or do doesn't create any protest. There's no real serious protest in this society which would make the authorities wonder whether their power is real. Am I really secure or not? Should I or should I not react? And society says, don't worry, Mr. Putin, don't do anything. Everything passes and this wave will pass too. I think that's exactly what they're counting on. You know, today, our newspaper published material which we consider to be sensational, fundamental, of the utmost importance in understanding what's going on.
Anna told me she had written a shocking story for Novaya Gazeta that morning, revealing how a terrorist involved in the Moscow theatre siege, where 140 people died, was now working for the government. He had also been given press credentials. There had been no reaction to Politkovskaya's revelations, and it seemed no one was interested.
Somebody called and said, "You write about things that people shouldn't know about. Do you understand? They don't want to know. You put your life on the line." Well, okay, I don't put my life on the line.
Not long after I talked to Anna Politkovskaya, she did pay with her life. In October 2006, she was gunned down in the lobby of her apartment building by an anonymous assassin. No one has been arrested. Litvinenko gave me the phone number of his best friend, Mikhail Trepashkin. "You should go and interview him in Moscow," Sasha said. Trepashkin had been an FSB officer like Litvinenko and had joined him at the press conference which denounced FSB corruption. Trepashkin had left the service and become a lawyer. In 2003, he was preparing a case which would connect the FSB with the Moscow apartment bombings. I talked to him just days before he was due to take the case to court. I found that Trepashkin had a somewhat less pessimistic view than Litvinenko of the Russian security system.
It's not right to simply say that the system has become rotten, that everybody takes bribes, everybody is a puppet, that it should be eliminated or pronounced criminal, which is actually what Litvinenko said about the FSB.
But Trepashkin was in no doubt that the fears that had made Litvinenko flee to Britain were still very real.
There is fear. Even people who attended our press conference, who before spoke openly, now say to me, "Don't go there or there, don't meet such and such, don't call Litvinenko, otherwise you'll generate anger. Then you'll be pursued, watched, you'll be framed, there'll be some provocation, they'll fabricate something against you, you'll end up in trouble one way or the other." This is one concrete example, but in general, if you start speaking against the authorities, there'll be repressive measures taken against you. Because of this fear, a person can't even express his own opinion anymore, let alone do something. For example, in the middle of the 90s, we had demonstrations. Try that now. Immediately you'll be labeled an extremist, they'll plant something on you and put you in prison.
Plant something, exactly that. 5 days after I talked to him, and just before he was due to challenge the FSB in court, Mikhail Trepashkin was arrested. A gun had been planted in his car. He was acquitted, but then immediately accused of disclosing state secrets. He was found guilty and remains in jail. I managed to talk to Trepashkin in jail the other day, just before he was due to be removed to a remote prison camp.
Что помогаете в этом деле, потому что, конечно, я очень обидно то, что сижу уже 4-й год,
Да.
делавший, то есть меня просто так взяли, закрыли. Во-первых, что я хотел довести, потому что уже больше 3 лет на эту тему говорю, значит, я не работал со сведениями, составляющими государственную тайну, которые, как написано в статье 2 закона, статье 2 закона о государственной тайне, могли бы причинить ущерб безопасности Российской Федерации. Просто-напросто придумали, у меня нету подписки.
Litvinenko, Politkovskaya, Tripashkin were all saying things which should have shocked society. But society refused to be impressed. The frustration of those whose search for truth seemed to be in vain bordered on personal tragedy. Back home in St. Petersburg, I was haunted by the figure of Sasha Litvinenko, exiled overseas, separated from the country he loved and had risked his life for.
There is an entrance in this club of KGB, but there is no exit from this club. And they are sure that people never do step out of the, how to say it's, not written rules of this organization. And Alexander was exactly the person who did not follow these bandit rules.
In November 1999, Litvinenko was arrested on a charge of hitting a taxi driver. Sasha denied the charge.
They said to me directly, "Do you think we really care about that taxi driver you hit? Even if you'd killed him, we couldn't care less. You're in prison because you betrayed the system. You're in prison because you refused to kill that Jew, Berezovsky. And you're in prison because you gave a press conference." The other inmates were laughing at me. "Alex, you're in prison for serious political crimes. You must have hit the president himself."
Sasha was released from jail in May 2000. But he was a marked man. He was being watched 24 hours a day and followed wherever he went.
I can't say I wasn't scared. Only a madman wouldn't have been scared. I understood that I'd rebelled against the system. I knew they'd stop at nothing.
Finally, Litvinenko decided it was time to go. He asked his wife and son to go to Spain for a holiday.
I was absolutely sure I'm going back to Russia because I couldn't imagine my life in a different way, completely. I couldn't imagine. And when Sasha called me, because it was left only 2 days for my holiday abroad, and after 2 days I should go to home. And Sasha told me, "Marina, if you decide to go home, of course, I will go back to Moscow as well, but they will put me in prison again and again. I will never be free after this." It was a very difficult decision for me, really, because it's not just decision for my life and for Anatoly, our son, as well. And it's not fair because he's 6 years old and I should take this decision for him. But who knows, after a few years, he could ask me, "Mommy, why you decide to take me from Russia?" You know? And when I finally decide, I thought in this time it was the most difficult time for me.
To make a decision to leave my country, where I gave my services, and I must stress honest services, for 20 years, was like suicide. I had 2 choices. I knew I couldn't go to prison. I told my wife that if they decided to jail me, I'd commit suicide. She said, "It's a sin in the eyes of God. I'll wait for you." But I said, "No way. I won't go through this humiliation. I'm an officer. I've always done my duty honestly."
Sasha Litvinenko started a new life with his wife and son in London and was given asylum on November 1st, 2000. Exactly 6 years later to the day, his enemies caught up with him.
Я свою войну в России проиграл. Что мне остается?
I lost my battle in Russia.
Либо сдаться в плен.
So what is there left for me to do? Either perish or give myself up.
Если меня не убили, либо бежать, либо сдаться в плен, либо застрелиться.
No, if I wasn't killed, it was either run or give myself up or shoot myself.
Потому что, в отличие от обыкновенной
I've
войны,
chosen to run. Why? Because unlike ordinary war, I had my child with me, and they threatened to kill him too.
я посмотрел на своего сына маленького.
I looked at my 6-year-old son, and I thought, what is he guilty of? He hasn't even started to live yet.
Я понял, что
I thought, I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I'll do everything within my power to save this child. And that's why I fled.
маленького мальчика, 6 лет. Именно
I don't care what they're saying about me back
Мне
there.
без разницы, что они там про меня говорят.
After Sasha's arrival in London, Boris Berezovsky employed and supported him during his first years of exile.
He worked for me. He tried to investigate very important stories in Russia, like bombing houses in '99, like criminal groups of FSB people, like criminal groups of bandits in general. And he collected this information. He had amazing memory. Even already being in England, he remembered the plates, number of the plates of the cars, which 5 years ago parked near my office.
Я понимаю, что в
I understand that in our country, in my motherland, we're all shit.
и Путин дерьмо, и
My parents are shit, and me, all of
мои
us.
родители, и я, и мои дети.
Now I live here in England, which is hard for me.
Я вот живу
I don't
здесь,
speak English very well,
мне тяжело здесь жить.
but I'm glad that my little child who lives here is not shit, but a human being here.
Он уже не дерьмо, он человек.
Of course, when I married with him, I never could predict what is finally will happen. Never, of course. But what you say, just he was very patient with everything what he did. It's maybe why he was so unique, Sasha. Just take it serious what Sasha said. Just take it serious, everything what Sasha said. It was not just his imagination.
In the summer of 2006, there was official confirmation of Sasha's fears. President Putin gave the FSB chilling new powers.
6-7 months ago, Putin signed the law which allow now FSB people to kill without any court decision, without anything, people who they decide are enemy of the country, because for them, enemy of the country equal enemy of them, yes? Who is against of Putin is against of the country. Who is against of Patrushev, chief of FSB, it's against of the country. Alexander immediately came to me and said, Boris, they are preparing to kill us.
Here we are. What else can I say?
Спасибо.
At seeing your friend up there in intensive care?
Well, I'm absolutely shocked. He looks like a ghost, and it's very, very upsetting. Who would inflict this? You know, you must see him. You know, it's kind of I'm not a weak man, but it's you know, I'm close to tears. To reduce somebody to the state he is in now, with a obviously intentional.
When you say he's screaming, I mean,
Well, he's in pain. He's in pain all the time. It's like, who did it? Who did it?
When he came to the hospital, he really changed every day. And it was really absolutely amazing, and I watched that I have impression now that every day was equal minimum 1 year of his life in the hospital. Because he was growing, he became wise.
Right.
without any illusions, absolutely logical, absolutely quiet.
And finally it's happened. And now maybe people will see it's exactly what Sasha tried to show them every time. But it's quite high price of this.
Первыми в 1937 году пострадали именно те сотрудники госбезопасности, которые отказались участвовать в том произволе, который был в 1937 году. Так вот, если мы сейчас не остановим этот произвол, который творится сейчас, а он может быть еще страшнее, может быть, чем в 1937 году. Когда-то наступят времена, и возрожденные органы госбезопасности России, когда их будут обвинять в этом беспределе, который творится сейчас, они будут отмываться нашими именами.